a creature named Gomez, who is he's a 2D creature, and he lives in a 2D village with his 2D friends and everything. And everybody believes that the world only has 2 dimensions. And one day, something happens, and it is revealed to him that there is a 3rd dimension, and he has to go out and explore it. And the whole game is about kind of reality and perception, and how perception is subjective, ergo reality is subjective. That's kind of the whole premise of the game. There isn't really a story per se. There is a little bit of cutscenes, like now at the beginning, you're in your 2D village, and then when you leave, the world opens up. But we're going to be talking about that later. Steph, ask me some questions.
Yeah, so let's see, where to
Quickly.
start? So I see that you made like a huge jump since last year. Like I was lucky enough to get access to a build like a year ago, and you seem like you were a little bit stuck creatively, like you were a little bit burned out.
I'm still burnt out.
But like,
Once you burn out, you're burned out for life, is the thing with burnout.
Yeah.
You never quite recover from a burnout. Yeah, it's like I said, it's been a 5-year development cycle. We thought it was going to take 1. We were wrong. Many reasons why it's been taking so long. One of them is no points of reference for a game like that. Obviously, these are a lot of Mario and Zelda and things like that, but the actual moment-to-moment rotation 3D gameplay, nobody's ever really done it like that, and no Echochrome and Crush and Super Paper Mario don't work like Fez at all. So it took about the first 2 years or so were all prototyping. We were calling it production. We thought we were in production. I was making levels and I thought that I was putting them in the bank and that they were going to be in the game, but pretty much none of the work that was made in the first 2 years is still in the game. Eventually we realized that what we were doing was prototyping, just figuring out what works about that gameplay and the kind of levels that should be built around the strengths of that mechanic. Once that happened, we started actually making the game and putting levels in the bank and fleshing out that world. But for a long time, it was just all those separate puzzle pieces that didn't fit together at all, and there wasn't really a full game there that you could play and get lost in for a long time, which was always the goal of the game, was to create a really inviting world that people would want to spend a lot of time in. And the last 2 years of development were absolute hell. It was horrible. There were many times where I thought that the project was actually going to die. We lost our funding a bunch of times. We had all sorts of falling out with colleagues and team members and things like that. But then maybe 6 months ago, all those puzzle pieces started actually falling into place, and we were starting to have a real game that was starting to feel pretty good. And our friends like Brendan that's been playing it for a while, and you were starting to tell us like, oh yeah, this is actually working. But only in the last couple of months, when all the music started getting in and that the game was actually playable from start to finish and all the items were there, that it started kind of sinking in that the game was pretty good, and I started freaking out a little bit less.
Nice. And so I'd like to ask you, like, I remember like the first experience I had with Fez was very, was like beautiful, but I was completely disoriented because it's like, it's 2D, but it's also 3D, and then there's doors that just take you to another dimension. And how did you solve that? Like,
Well, one thing we did for that is what you just saw happen. The very first part of the game is strictly 2D. You're gonna get the Fez now, and then you get the 3D power, and you revisit that 3D village, that village in 3D, and you see the other sides of it. You see the other sides of the room. So the whole idea was to present the very basic platform mechanics. The controls, how far you can jump, how far you can grab a ledge and things like that in 2D to make it much more accessible. And once people were kind of calibrated to how the game feels, then throw in the 3D mechanic in that same environment that you just familiarize yourself with. But it's pretty simple. I mean, it's a very classical 2D platformer in that you jump around on platforms, but by using the triggers you can rotate the perspective. That is literally the only twist in the game. And here comes the Fez. So the Fez is a kind of ancient ancient symbol of understanding of the third dimension because it is a cube. And when you wear the fez, you can move in the third dimension. That's why all the other villagers are kind of stuck on their plane, and now Gomez has the power.
Look good on you.
But basically, it took a lot of trial and error figuring out how it worked, and a big part of making the game accessible was level design. Level design was really kind of overwhelming for a long time. There was a little bit too much to it. The levels got really, really long because they can't get very wide. When levels get too wide and you rotate them, stuff moves too fast, and it's really hard to read the 3D space.
Did we just crash here, Phil?
No, that's a fake crash. The game reboots, and you replay the intro, but now you have your fez. The world of fez is very much a video game world. It runs on computer logic.
Yeah, so,
Ask me something else.
you know, you're like one of my favorite Twitter personalities.
Twitterer?
Because you're like you're the only person on online that, like, I read your tweets and I understand who you are. Like, I'm not surprised when I meet you afterwards because you're like tweeting all caps.
Yeah, people think it's an act, but no. If I could shout all the time, I would shout everything I say.
It kind of feels like, yeah.
I'm holding back. I wish I was constantly screaming everything, but...
like, so one of the things you were shouting on Twitter was like how much you loved logo design. That was like about a year ago, and you were like, I just want to fucking make logos. That's my thing. Like, fuck games. Like, why am I doing games? And
I don't know.
I don't know. What's the relation between like your graphic design and your like game making?
Well, making games is hard. Like, it's nearly impossible. Every game that ships is a goddamn miracle. Whereas logo design is fairly manageable. You know, it's just an image, and you spend some time on it, and then when it's done, it's just a static image. It's not like people can break your logo or get lost in your logo, or they can't beat your logo, or whatever. I've always had a huge interest in graphic design, and it's kind of something I do on the side for fun to not go crazy, because I don't do it professionally, and you know, even when I do it for friends, I don't charge for it, because I love it. I think I've put a lot of my graphic design expertise in crafting the look of Fez. Like, it's not just pixel art. I think there's kind of the 3D nature of it, but how everything is squared, and you know, the patterns repeated everywhere that have information in them. There's this kind of you know, in graphic design, you're making something because you're trying to convey a piece of information or something like that, and it has to be clear and readable, and I think I applied a lot of that to Fez because the environment and the gameplay mechanic could have made things very, very confusing. Everything had to be pretty clear.
Yeah. Did you make every single pixel?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So basically, the core team is me and Renaud. He's the programmer. He created the engine. He created the editor. Everything from scratch. Well, in XNA, but other than that, the editor and everything from scratch. I did all the art, all the level design, game design, pretty much every, like, coming up with stuff. And then our friend Adam Saltzman has been helping out with animation, and so has Paul Robertson, the amazing Australian pixel art animator. He's done a lot of the Gomez animation and the wildlife and stuff like that. And then Rich Vreeland, aka Disasterpiece, is making the music for it. But I did all the art.
Alright.
Alright, let me talk about what's going on right now. So Brendan's gotten to the village again, and he has his fez, so everything's in 3D now. So he can revisit places that previously only had one side to them, and see the other sides of the rooms that hadn't really been occupied by the villagers. And all of the rooms might seem just kind of empty, and there's nothing really to collect there, or you know, there isn't a puzzle, but there's information everywhere. Like I said, there isn't really a story in Fez, but there's a lot of lore and kind of internal logic to that universe that isn't explained directly to the player, but there's tons of details and hints in the backgrounds on posters and, you know, statues you find that all contain a little tidbit of information that relates to how that world works and its origin, and why these 2D people are living this 3D world. It's there for people that care to look for that stuff. But to the people that don't care about that stuff, it's just an empty room with nothing in it.
Did